It is 9:04, News Talk Sports 1270 WLBR, our continuing live candidate debates from the studio here of 1270 WLBR, featuring today the two candidates seeking what will be an open seat in the 101st State House District. We're joined...
It is Deb College Day on News Talk Sports 12.
Sorry about that. We're joined by Democrat Catherine Cavi Miller. Hello to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I didn't turn my mic on. Would you like to say hello again?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Good morning to you. Also in studio is Republican John Schlegel. And good morning, John.
Good morning, Laura, and good morning to the Lebanon Valley.
Well, I'm delighted that you're both here. And as you know, we're going to start our forum with an up to 90-second opening statement. You are allowed to use any sort of notes or a prepared speech or script if you want. And we always look to the alphabet. You're an educator. You understand that. And the last name in alphabetical order. And so, Cavi Miller, you go up first with your opening statement. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity. And really close to the election, I think it helps for everybody to hear our different points of view. So I'm Catherine Miller. My nickname is Cavi. This is my second run in politics. Last year I ran to be mayor of Cornwall, and it was a very narrow race, and it was an awesome learning experience. I'm not a politician by nature, but my background is pretty varied. I've been a cook, I've been a welder, I've been a pilot, I was a forensic engineer, an archivist. So in my experience, I've worked with a lot of different people from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds. I've gotten to know how to follow, how to lead, and I'm really excited to be getting into politics because I think having a wide background like that really helps me understand the way people think, what they need, what their priorities are. So, that's my story.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. And now with opening statement, John Schlegel. Good morning.
Good morning, Laura, and again, good morning, Lebanon Valley. My name is John Schlegel. And to the people of the 101st, I ask that you vote for me to be your representative in the State House. My name appears on the bottom right side of the ballot, as I am the last name on that list on the right side. You know, the new 101st is now made up of Lebanon City, West Lebanon Township, North Lebanon Township, South Lebanon Township, Cornwall Borough, North Cornwall Township, and West Cornwall Township. I'm running to serve all of you. I was a school administrator in both school districts whose area makes up the 101st. I have a proven record of caring, providing effective and strong leadership, and getting results. My candidacy, though, is not about me. It's about we. That is why my campaign theme is working together and standing for you, for it is the cornerstone of my mission for you in the State House. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you, candidates, for your opening statements. We'll now move on to the questioning portion of our debate. And again, I am the only person who has formulated these questions. I've taken no input from anybody else, and so it's just you and me and the listeners here. We'll begin our questioning, and we'll start with you, Mr. Schlegel. And I do want to begin talking about elections, because I think that this idea of election integrity has dominated our news cycle and the political sphere for several years now. It still looms very large in the wake of the 2020 presidential election integrity, that is, both in Pennsylvania and nationwide. So I'm going to ask a series of questions to which each of you can respond. Do you support making voters show identification of some kind when they go to the polls? Why or why not?
I do support that initiative. I think that's something that folks in general, and certainly in the 101st, they do expect to have to be able to do in this day and age. And I can promise you this, having worked at the polls at the primary, there will be voters at the polls that they will get out of their car, they will show up with some form of ID. In fact, they've even asked me, they said, John, are they going to ask us to show ID at the poll? Well, of course, I can't answer that question at the time because I'm not allowed into the poll, but they do expect that. So I think anything that we can do moving forward to make sure that every legal vote counts, that our elections are free and fair for all the voters, and that there is consistency among voting processes throughout the 67 counties. I think that's a good thing, and that will help to instill voter confidence in our election process.
All right, same question to you. Do you want Cavi or Catherine?
Cavi works.
Cavi, all right.
But it's Catherine on the ballot.
Okay, all right. Catherine Miller, the same question to you. Do you support making voters show some ID in order to cast their ballot?
So as of right now, in Pennsylvania, when you register to vote, you need to show your ID. And also when you vote for the first time at a new precinct, you're required to show your ID. I believe there are 15 different types of ID, and that can include anything from a government-issued driver's license to a bill. So I think, in my opinion, that's adequate. I think any measures to restrict voting is not going to help our democracy.
All right, very good. Next question, and Ms. Miller, you can answer that one. Do you support Act 77, specifically the no-excuse absentee ballots for voters and the ability for voters to then submit those ballots using a drop box versus mailing them through the U.S. mail? 60 seconds.
Absolutely, I do. Again, like I said, any measure that restricts voting is not democratic. I believe that people should be able to vote however they can. Not everybody has the privilege of taking a day off or taking time off of work. So I think it's important for people to be able to vote either via absentee ballot, mail-in ballot, early voting, however they can do it, or on the day of the election on November 8th. I think it's just crucial that everybody has their voice heard.
All right, very good. Mr. Schlegel, 60 seconds.
I think, Laura, Act 77 was kind of a nice idea when it started. However, there's been too many people that have had their hands in the soup that have nothing to do with what's actually in that legislation. So I think we either need to follow the law as it's written and intended, or we need to repeal it altogether because, for example, there's nothing in the law that has anything to do with drop boxes. So let's either follow the law, strengthen it, or let's repeal it and let's start over again and work on some other initiatives that have been proposed.
All right. Next question, and Mr. Schlegel, you'll answer first. And, many states in our area, Delaware, for example, also Georgia, Florida, they have this early voting where people can go to the polls, vote in person, days, sometimes even weeks before the actual election day, inclusive of sometimes even Saturdays within that early voting window. Would you support such a thing for Pennsylvania?
Well, under the guise of making sure that all voters have the chance to cast a legal vote, I think we need to take a look at anything that will allow that to happen. Having been a social studies teacher, I can't help but think, used to teach about Election Day, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. And, that's the way it's been. Doesn't necessarily mean moving forward that's the way it has to be. I certainly would be willing to look at having maybe Election Day as a holiday, number one, maybe even moving Election Day to a Friday and giving voters the opportunity to vote not only on a Friday, but maybe even a Saturday. And that would expand their opportunities to be able to vote.
All right, 60 seconds. Same question to you, Ms. Miller.
I agree. I think if what you're saying is correct, that voting should be a national holiday, I think we'd all benefit from that on that Tuesday. Any opportunity to hear from every voter, every constituent is so important. If early voting means that we can enable all Pennsylvanians to cast their ballot, then absolutely I'm for it.
All right.
I also just wanted to say, Act 77 was passed with bipartisan support, and I think that's really crucial to keep in mind.
All right, very good. Very quickly here, I think this is probably a yes or no answer. Will you accept the outcome of the November 8th election, regardless of how it shakes out, Ms. Miller?
Absolutely.
Mr. Schlegel.
I would prefer that I win this election, but yes, I will.
All right. Very good. I think the same could probably be said by your opponent.
Absolutely.
All right.
Do I get a rebuttal on that?
You do. Throughout the course of the debate, if you want to refute something your opponent says, just give me the high sign. You'll be given extra time to do so. All right. As we move on in this debate, let's talk about, you mentioned, Mr. Schlegel, that you were a social studies teacher and obviously a school administrator. So, and I believe, Ms. Miller, you answer first on this one. Should Pennsylvania require universal pre-K for all of its schools on the front end of education and a graduation test for 12th graders before they are allowed to graduate? 60 seconds.
I do believe in universal pre-K. I don't believe it should be mandated. For me personally, both of my kids were homeschooled for preschool, and they really jumped right in kindergarten. And while I understand that that's not an option for everybody, I think it should be available for people so that people have the choice, absolutely, before the kids start kindergarten. With regards to graduation tests, I don't agree with that. I don't believe in that. I think kids are tested with PSSAs and SATs and ACTs, all the tests that the kids have to take. I don't believe that they should be tested in order to graduate. I think part of their education for high school is constant testing, constant evaluation, and that just adds one more hoop for the kids to jump through, going on to the next stage in their life.
All right, very good. 60 seconds, Mr. Schlegel.
Let's start with pre-kindergarten. I don't support mandating it. There are currently resources in place in both our school districts and 101st to help parents help their children to have the foundation in order to which to build upon, so that they can benefit from the programs and services that they're offered. That's offered in various capacities in both our school districts currently. Also, keep in mind, not every child is ready when a particular law or mandate says that they're ready to learn. Not every child learns, or not every learner learns at the same time or the same rate. So I would not mandate that. There are resources available. In terms of graduation requirements or an exit exam, that would be an interesting discussion in the legislature as to what an exit exam would look like. The truth of the matter is, because of No Child Left Behind, children in high school, that they do need to pass the Keystone test. That is a graduation requirement at Lebanon High School as well as Cedar Crest.
So you would be interested in evaluating possibly?
That would be an interesting discussion that I would gladly like to participate in, but I don't support that. I think we have excellent school directors at both school districts. I know them all, and I know they deeply care about their students. Our administrators, they were at one point in time, many of them were math teachers, and they were excellent teachers. I know many of them. I've helped to hire a number of the teachers in the 101st. And so I would leave it up to the stakeholders, the parents, the teachers, the school directors, and the administrators to come together and decide what kids need to know and be able to do and demonstrate.
All right. As we continue on, this is our 101st District State House candidate debate, live on air, our Talk of the Town live debate series continuing. Catherine Miller, Democrat for the 101st District State House seat, and Republican John Schlegel. Our next question, Ms. Miller, I believe you answer this one first. And the Dodd decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade in America, has certainly made abortion a critically important issue in this election cycle. And as we approach November 8th, and as we approach the election, and one of you two sitting here will be elected to the 101st, what is your position on abortion? And furthermore, in Pennsylvania, do you think that the current rules and regulations as it pertains to abortion need to be changed, need to be strengthened, need to be relaxed more? 60 seconds.
Thank you. This is something I feel very passionately about, as it's affecting so many of our constituents, both statewide and federally. This has just been a huge deal since this summer when the Dobbs decision was handed down. I believe that regardless of how somebody feels about a woman's right to choose, regardless if they would prefer to do it themselves or not, if they were in that position, the government should stay out of it, and that includes the federal and the state governments. This decision is a huge life-changing decision, and the only person that needs to be making that decision is a woman and her doctor, if she chooses, her family. But putting a referendum on the ballot so that other people can choose what would happen to a woman in that position is not a good idea, especially when, quite frankly, the Republican Party has been interested in repealing Act 77, taking away people's voices, people's right to vote, and then positing to put a referendum on the ballot is just that's not democracy.
All right. Mr. Schlegel.
Well, in terms of the idea of free and fair elections, I think all Americans and everyone in the 101st in the Commonwealth, they want everyone to vote. I hope that they do that on Election Day on November 8th if they haven't done it also on the mail-in ballot. In terms of abortion, it's interesting. I heard Ben Carson speak to this subject a couple weeks ago, and he cautioned everyone. He said, when you engage others in discussion about the Roe versus Wade decision, he said, do so with some compassion and grace. He said, because invariably there are going to be folks that are involved in that conversation that probably have had an abortion. So compassion is the order of the day. I'm pro-life. And I believe most of the people that I've talked to in the 101st, that they do support abortion in the instances of those rare exceptions of rape, incest, and the life of the mother. They don't accept, I believe, abortion in the late term or at birth. I don't think that's too extreme. And so I think we need to approach this subject with some dignity and respect for all concerned. But I would also say that when a decision's being made, about an abortion, there's a doctor involved, there's a woman involved, but I also think that there's another human being involved, and that's the unborn. And I just believe that the unborn does need to have a voice.
So as a follow-up, then, Mr. Schlegel, are you saying that you obviously it sounds as though you support exceptions to abortion in the instances of rape, incest, or life of the mother?
Yeah, and I do think that's supported by most of the people in the 101st as well. But
would you vote to outlaw abortion in Pennsylvania?
Well, I think that there's a lot of other things that will come into play. It's nice to have in this debate, this kind of conversation and hold one's feet to the fire, and I understand it for the sake of discussion. But let's analyze what's going to happen. First of all, the abortion matter is now a state right. If it's going to be a part of the Constitution, voters are going to have the opportunity to weigh in on. And I think that then there's a lot of people and a lot of voices that are going to be heard before a decision is made. And sometimes, not only on abortion, but on a number of issues, it is really best to allow all the stakeholders to weigh in and then move forward in making a decision.
All right. To you, Ms. Miller, what is your stance on, obviously your stance is not to outlaw abortion, but what about abortion in the exceptions that Mr. Schlegel has outlined?
Late-term abortion is not legal in Pennsylvania after 23 weeks. Getting an abortion is not really an option for most people. And I also want to just speak to in the rare instances of rape. I mean, 1 in 3 women or 1 in 4 women are raped, and almost 65 to 75% of women have been sexually assaulted. So I think we need to move away from the narrative that rape is rare, because it happens a lot.
All right. If Republican gubernatorial candidate Doug Mastriano wins the election, he does not favor any exceptions. Life of the mother, incest, or rape with the creation of a baby.
Correct.
Obviously, you're firmly opposed to that.
Very firm. Yes.
And Mr. Schlegel, what is your view on what your party's Republican gubernatorial candidate has stated about abortion?
Well, Doug Mastriano can speak for himself. I've met him. He's a very nice man, a very caring man, a very religious man. So I'll let him speak for himself. But this is what I was talking about a minute ago. On some of these most complex and very emotionally charged issues, I think we do need to take a step back. And when we engage one another, I think we need to seek first to understand one another and then to be understood.
Well, he's made his point very understood.
He has made that clear at the very beginning. Right now in Pennsylvania, we allow 24 weeks that abortion can be had. There have been places like Virginia where they were willing to go much further beyond that, and that was the position of the former governor. That might be one of the reasons he's now a former governor. So, for us to have these discussions, take a look at the law as it's written now, and then make some decisions as to whether to scale it back. That's what Mississippi did, and that's how we got to the new Roe versus Wade decision. Not because Mississippi outlawed abortion, but simply because they limited it to 15 weeks instead of whatever else that they had in the state of Mississippi.
What do you, Mr. Schlegel, answer first here? What is your opinion of these heartbeat bills that also have incorporated in the legislation criminal sanctions and penalties for those that drive somebody to an abortion center, whether it's out of state, whether it's in state? Should people that assist others be held criminally liable for their participation?
Well, I'd be interested in having more dialogue about that. I think my decision right here and now is predicated on what the law is in Pennsylvania and what we can or cannot do moving forward. Whether or not someone can go to another state where it is legal, I think that's a whole different discussion. And again, there's just so many pieces to this. I just think we need to take it step by step. This decision came back this summer, so I think we need to kind of lower the temperature, engage one another, and we'll work through this, because all of us working together is better than one of us.
All right, and Ms. Miller? People being held criminally liable for assisting somebody in obtaining an abortion.
I think, and not to mention the doctors who would be held criminally liable too. I think that's draconian and terrible, and I think it's regressive. We're going back, 50, 100 years to when women were treated as second-class citizens.
All right, very good. We'll move on here. It is our Talk of the Town debate with the 101st District candidates, Republican John Schlegel and Democrat Catherine Miller. Mr. Schlegel, you're up first for this one. Do you favor Pennsylvania joining RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative? Why or why not? 60 seconds.
I would certainly offer some caution for us to engage in that kind of initiative, and here's why. Pennsylvania is rich in natural resources. Entrepreneurs for decades have looked to Pennsylvania to use the natural resources to generate power and energy for not only the Commonwealth but also for our country. To engage in that kind of relationship with states that don't have that kind of history and that kind of capacity and natural resources, I don't think makes a lot of sense. I'm a firm believer in using the natural resources that we have now to its fullest capacity, because I think that will help deal with the inflation now, that will help businesses to grow, and certainly if there are other alternatives, let those entrepreneurs and those dreamers develop those and compete for the business in the free market.
All right, very good. And 60 seconds, Ms. Miller.
I am in favor. I think what New England has been doing with RGGI is great. I do believe in good-paying union jobs, fair wages. So I want to make sure that with starting these greenhouse gas initiatives, which again we desperately need to do because climate change is real, fracking, all of those practices do contribute to global warming. But I want to make sure that not only are we moving forward environmentally in the state of Pennsylvania, but that we keep people employed, and we keep them employed positively, helping out with switching from eventually using oil and gas to green energy.
All right, very good. Follow-up question, Ms. Miller, you'll answer first here. I think you sort of alluded to it, but where are you on fracking, and is drill baby drill the only answer to Pennsylvania's energy needs?
No, it's not. We have so many other amazing ways of harnessing energy. Yes, we do rely on fossil fuels right now, but again, what we're doing is not good for the environment, and it's not sustainable. I think we can all agree on that. I think what the discussion is like, how quickly can we move to green energy? How quickly can we switch jobs, switch focus into that? I mean, if we keep fracking, are we going to go back into the Utica shale? Is that going to be an option? There has to be an end to this, and like a plan beyond just fracking the Marcellus shale.
Very good. 60 seconds, Mr. Schlegel.
Well, again, I would just reiterate, we have a history, and we're plenty in our natural resources, and particularly natural gas, which is very clean. I think for the right here and right now, given the economy, given the economic power that America has traditionally been, and Pennsylvania has been at the heart of that, we should continue that. And as I just said, certainly if there are alternative energy sources that people out there have, let's develop them. But I think the operative word that I've heard already from my opponent is that eventually. And, well, eventually doesn't help the folks of the 101st right now. So let's use what we have. Let's do it as efficiently, as safely as we possibly can. And then let's move forward, and we'll see how that shakes out in the free market.
All right, very good. One final question along this line. And Ms. Miller, I believe you'll answer this one first. Governor Wolf announced in September that the Commonwealth received $25.4 million in funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law passed by Congress for deployment of electric vehicle charging stations throughout the Commonwealth. Do you support this move, and please explain?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same kind of idea of moving from fracking to other sources of energy that eventually, like, we will have to get away from relying on fossil fuels. I think that is a good initiative, a good first step into having people switch to electric cars, and I'm all on board for that.
Very good. Mr. Schlegel.
I think if the federal government is giving us money for that purpose, I think, number one, we can only hope that's all that money is going to be used for, is for that purpose. And as I said earlier, we'll see how that transpires and how that develops. I'm not for electric cars at this point, and certainly what's being done to folks in the 101st and to folks in the Commonwealth, it does hurt them. We're unsure of what, when, and where these electric cars are going to be affordable, and so again, what I would say is if the federal government gives us that money, that's what we have to use it for. Otherwise, we're going to lose it. So by all means, let's move forward and go ahead with that. But it really hasn't been a viable option at this point, and there's a lot of questions with the batteries and also the effects of where those batteries come from and on the environment as well. I mean, you talk about climate change. I can remember 4 years ago being at dinner on New Year's Eve. It was 0 degrees. 1978, I was in Times Square celebrating New Year's Eve. It was 0 degrees. So temperatures change. It's no matter whether it's summer or winter in the Antarctic, it's cold.
All right. Any rebuttal, Ms. Miller?
Just a comment that, local differences in temperature and weather changes is not really what climate change is all about. Climate change is about, ice caps melting and patterns of weather, more extreme weather phenomena, but small variations in weather, small variations in temperature is not what climate change is.
Well, along those lines, I did have a follow-up question from a different question earlier, but maybe it's in light of your commentary. Let's maybe flesh this out a little bit. And Ms. Miller, you'll answer first on this one. Do you believe that climate change is a naturally occurring phenomenon, or is it man-caused? 60 seconds.
Yes, to both of them. Our planet is very old. Our solar system is very old. We've been looking at changes in climate ever since the beginning of time, but we have accelerated those changes rapidly as a result of burning fossil fuels and things that aren't sustainable. So yes, I believe that it is cyclical. It has slowly been degrading over time, but we have definitely accelerated it.
Very good. Mr. Schlegel.
I think certainly what man has done certainly has contributed to it. I mean, that was kind of the basis of the song in the year 2525, you remember, a number of years ago.
I thought that was a bit on Conan.
But in any event, I'm just not sure that whatever we going to do in this country is going to have that great of effect on global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it. We need to have a partnership amongst all the countries of the world, particularly some of the biggest polluters like China. So, but by all means, I think those of us in this country, we need to do everything that we can to make sure that we model the appropriate behaviors we used to talk about in teaching, and that is to do things safely, efficiently, and in the best interest of our people.
All right, very good. You're listening to our 101st District Talk of the Town live on-air debate here from the studio, joined in studio by the two candidates seeking the seat, Republican John Schlegel and Democrat Catherine Cavi Miller. Our next question, and Mr. Schlegel, you will be up first for the response. Every legislative session, Pennsylvanians hear that property tax reform is being taken up, being studied, it's being debated in committee, there's blue ribbon commissions, etc., etc. Do you have a plan? Any plan to deal with property tax reform, or are you satisfied with the system currently in use to fund our schools? 60 seconds.
I think the idea of being satisfied with anything in life, I always, when I talk with our student teachers that I work with, I always talk about making sure that we monitor and adjust. We always talk about continuous progress. And so even in this regard, I think regardless of where we're at, we want to take a look at can we do it better. You know, I saved the school district $400,000 just because I was director of secondary education. Keep in mind that school districts only have control over 10% of any operating budget. The rest is in fixed wages and benefits. And even the ability to tax our property owners is limited by state legislation. You know, we do have some things in place now. The Homestead Farmstead Act, which many folks did qualify for, and they would see a difference between what they're actually taxed and what is on their tax bill. We could certainly take a look at expanding that. Whatever we do, though, if we're going to eliminate property tax as been proposed and has been discussed, as you had mentioned, over the years, we're going to have to replace it with some other funding source, and that's really where the discussion is, and that's we need to get beyond that in order to monitor and adjust and make improvements.
Very good. And Ms. Miller?
The Homestead Act hasn't been reassessed, reevaluated since 2009, so we're way beyond, a deadline for that. We need to reassess that and see how we can help the taxpayers of the 101. As far as the property tax reform that Representative Frank Ryan has proposed, early on in this process, my opponent has said that he would back Frank Ryan's plan. As far as I'm concerned, I don't believe in cutting property taxes 100%. I believe that we do need property tax reform, but I'm very much in fair funding for the schools. Right now, the Cornwall-Lebanon School District is underfunded per student by about $1,400 a year. Lebanon is $6,400 a year. So Mr. Schlegel's right. We do need something in place, but cutting property taxes is not an option.
All right. As a follow-up, what plan might you suggest, or what plan sort of intrigues you as possibly being the solution to overwrought taxpayers who, as been said many, many times, never really own their home? You get behind on your taxes, they're going to sheriff sale you. So what methodology might you find more sustainable, more beneficial to citizens?
Absolutely. Yeah, again, just looking at the Homestead Act and seeing if we can expand on that, seeing if we can get people more property tax credit or property tax rebates, and also obviously passing fair funding for the schools. That would give taxpayers a big break.
Mr. Schlegel.
Well, and there is current litigation going on right now as we speak relative to the funding formula. So, we're going to get a decision on that at some point in time, and that will help to drive future decisions and future conversations on this subject. And again, I'll go back to the Homestead Farmstead. Folks did benefit from it right now, and they would see that on their tax bill if they compare it to what they would actually be paying in tax. There's a need to reassess that, to revisit that, and possibly raise the qualifications for that. I certainly think that that's an option to look at.
Other states, Virginia, where I have lived, they use the proceeds of their state lottery to fund their schools. Tonight is a drawing for a more than $1 billion jackpot in Powerball. They're selling tickets about every 7 seconds. Currently, our lottery proceeds are directed to seniors in this Commonwealth. Might you consider swapping that, maybe funding out of the state budget senior programs, and instead using those lottery taxes for the funding of schools as a mechanism to offset property taxes? Mr. Schlegel.
Again, under the guise of monitor and adjusting and continuous progress, and certainly willing to listen to any possible options that are going to benefit our school system, because in the Commonwealth, the legislature does have the obligation to make sure that we have an efficient school system that services the Commonwealth. However, we want to make sure we don't leave our senior citizens behind, because they have many needs, and they've been very productive in our society for so long that we certainly want to look out to meet the needs of those folks that have served us for so long.
Very good. Ms. Miller.
How much was the jackpot again? Maybe we should all go.
I think it's like $1.2 billion.
When we leave here, maybe we should all.
Of course, your chances of winning are $292 million in one.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would support using some of the funds for education too, along with, like Mr. Schlegel said, keeping it with our aging population.
Very good. All right, we'll continue on. It is our live on-air 101st District debate. Next question, Ms. Miller, you respond first. On Labor Day 2015, Patrick Durr shot and killed beloved Mount Gretna shopkeeper Stacy Pennington, then turned the gun on himself while sitting on a bench outside her store, the Emporium. He had a long history of abuse, criminal charges, and mental illness. The murder-suicide reignited discussion of red flag laws and whether Pennsylvania should have them. What is your opinion on red flag laws? 60 seconds.
This is a really difficult question for me to answer because my family and I were riding our bikes to Mount Gretna that day, and we came upon the scene as the police were there, and we saw this poor woman. It was a very traumatic day for me and my family, and for I know the entire town, the entire county. And yeah, I am in favor of red flag laws. There are so many people out there that have weapons that should not. My opponent and I have discussed the Second Amendment before, but there's got to be something in place to protect children in schools. And as an educator, I know that he can appreciate that. I think we're all tired of these lockdown drills, and we've got to come up with a way to protect, people in domestic abuse situations. We've got to protect kids in schools. There's got to be more than just what we have now.
All right, Mr. Schlegel, 60 seconds. Red flag laws.
Rather than go to another set of laws, let's enforce the laws as they are in place now. If someone owns a firearm and wants to transport it across state lines, there are laws and rules that how you do that. Follow the laws, and if you don't follow that law and you're caught, there are consequences. Same way with a hunter. If a hunter takes a break, there's a certain process that they need to do, otherwise they could run the risk of being arrested. Let's follow the laws that are on the book. Now, in terms of having concerns about those folks that are a threat to themselves and others, there is a process that's already in place. It's called a 302 process. And as a public service to the folks of the 101st, if you have family members or you know people that you think are a danger to themselves or to others, it's a legal process, and certainly our counseling agencies, crisis intervention, any number of resources are available to help you go through that process. But again, I want to stress that it's a due process type of situation where you can make a case why someone should get mental health or psychological services, and that would also include not being able to own a firearm. On the other hand, that person also has a chance to defend themselves as well. That's what our country's based on, due process, and we do have laws in place. Let's follow them, and we do have a process to take a look at addressing those needs for those that we have some concerns about.
Any rebuttal?
I mean, I said this before, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need any of these laws, but the truth of the matter is not everybody is a law-abiding citizen. Not everybody should own a gun. There are people that, again, have violent tendencies, have criminal pasts, have issues with mental health. I think certainly expanding mental health access is key, but to say that we don't need more legislation and people should just start following the law, there's something really missing there.
I'm not saying people should just follow the law. Yes, they should follow the law, so I guess I am saying that. What I'm saying is the laws need to be followed, and not only do they need to be followed, they need to be enforced as they're written. And I think stronger enforcement and taking criminals off the street and prosecuting them and making sure that they have the appropriate consequences as per the law, that's the way we want to go. And there are processes in place to help individuals get the services they need and to prevent them from harming themselves or others.
As a follow-up, and Mr. Schlegel, you'll answer first, are you a Second Amendment absolutist? Or are there any reasonable limitations that should be considered with regard to gun laws, such as placing an age limit on the purchase of AR-15 style rifles, or having some sort of limitation or ban on these high-capacity magazines?
Well, again, I do support the Second Amendment as it's written. I know the Pennsylvania Constitution indicates that the right to own and bear arms should not be questioned. The folks that I know that own firearms, they're very responsible, they're law-abiding, and they're security-conscious individuals. So when we talk about Second Amendment rights with strict gun controls, to them that's an oxymoron. It's jargon that is confusing, and the reality of it is it is designed to restrict their rights. And as I said, I think gun owners, by and large, are very responsible and safety conscious. I've taken a gun safety course, and I've taken 2 conceal and carry courses. One of the things that is stressed, even though it's one's right to own and operate a firearm, particularly at one's house if they're invaded, a couple things that are stressed. Number 1, you will be investigated. Number 1, you will probably be charged. And number 3, you will probably have scars from that experience for the rest of your life. So keep that in mind.
All right. Ms. Miller, again, Second Amendment absolutism. Are there reasonable restrictions that can be placed upon gun laws, such as age limits for guns like AR-15s or high-capacity magazine bans?
I do believe that I'm not an absolutist. I do believe that we need to have an additional legislation on this subject because, as I said earlier, people don't follow the law. The good thing about red flag laws and age limits and additional laws on top of just what we have in the Constitution is that, as Mr. Schlegel said, the average gun owner will not be affected by this. We're not talking about, as you said, the responsible people that you know that are law-abiding citizens. We're talking about the people that are not law-abiding citizens. We're talking about that other small percentage of gun owners. As far as having, reformed convicts own firearms, that is a concern as well. We have recidivism rates of about 67%. So I'm not saying that people who have been to prison should not own guns, especially depending on what they went to prison for, but it is something to look at, yeah.
Specifically, I did ask about these AR-15 weapons. These are the weapon of choice for the school shooters, many of whom are young men. 17, 18, 16 years old. The boy in Florida is being sentenced today for perpetrating the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting. The kid who killed all the children in Uvalde, Texas, had mental issues and was able to purchase an AR-15 gun and stroll through the school and kill kids. Those guns, those weapons of choice of these school shooters, should there be age limits on them?
In most of those instances, that as I recall, that there was some concern about that person to begin with, and I think that's where it starts. And again, in Pennsylvania, as I said, we do have that legal due process procedure that should be in place. I think the critical thing is to enforce the law as it's written, rather than expand it further. We talk about the AR-15. The AR-15 that I know that people own, the military isn't taking those into combat because they're not high magazine capacities. So, I would enforce the Second Amendment as it's written and as it's upheld in our state constitution, and let's use the things that we have in place to protect our citizens and use firearms responsibly.
And the AR-15 style weapons, Ms. Miller?
Unfortunately, it's a very easy switch to take one of those weapons and make it high capacity. I agree with the fact that the military doesn't use those specific weapons, but I do believe in age limits. Right now in Uvalde, Texas, the school administration is asking parents for DNA samples to identify their children if another mass shooting happens again. I would rather have legislation on the outset that protects these kids from these shootings rather than asking for DNA samples from our children.
There's been oftentimes in the wake of these horrific school shootings, conversation about we need to have these armed guards in the school. We maybe need to arm teachers in schools as a first line of defense, because even though the police often respond very quickly to the scene, seconds takes lives. These guns can kill within seconds. So along those lines, and Mr. Schlegel, you'll answer first, I think, on this one. what do the schools in Pennsylvania, the schools in the 101st District, the schools across the nation need to do to become more strong and less of a vulnerable target for these crazed gunmen, whatever their age?
Thank the Lord that we haven't had to experience those kinds of things in the 101st, and my heart goes out to any other school district and community that's had to endure that. I can't imagine what that's like, and to suffer the loss, of life in general and of one's children. I think in the 101st we do a really good job of trying to be very safety conscious. Number one, we do listen to the stakeholders. We listen to kids, we listen to teachers, and we also listen to our parents and the community in terms of what they think and in terms of what they value. All our schools have very strict policies in how one is able to enter the school, even how one exits. They keep a close watch on who's coming in and why they're coming in and where they're going. I think that the security details that we have, the resource officers, they are highly trained. They need to constantly continue to be trained and be vigilant on the traffic that goes through to our schools. So right now we're limiting traffic. We do have resource officers, and I think in general we are very in tune to concerns that we might have for students or anyone else that would enter our school buildings, and keep an eye on them.
All right. Ms. Miller, what can be done to harden the schools so they're not such a soft target for gunmen?
Well, I think in this case, in my opinion, this is an Occam's razor kind of thing. What's the simplest solution? The simplest solution is legislation. The simplest solution is to protect our kids using the laws. After that, I don't believe in arming teachers. I mean, teachers a lot of them are not pro-guns. A lot of them don't like guns. Friends that I've spoken to that said that they have no interest in having a gun in their classroom. I also realize, and I'm sure Mr. Schlegel has seen the same thing, how stressed and stretched our teachers are. Arming them is not a good idea. I mean, if we can't get sensible legislation passed, having security guards in the school would be the next best thing. But giving teachers guns is not an option, in my opinion.
All right. Any follow-up?
Well, again, we do have resource officers, and they are armed in our schools. And we do those drills, just like we used to do fire drills just when we were kids. We do a whole myriad of other kinds of drills, much of which we don't talk about to the community because we want someone to get a hold of our plan. But we do have safety plans in place. We do practice them. We do follow them.
Very good. We'll move on. Ms. Miller, you're next on this question. What is the biggest takeaway, in your opinion, from the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, for me personally, I appreciate my friends and family a lot more after going so long without seeing anybody, being isolated. But more seriously, I think that this has been a really traumatic time for everybody, for everything. I mean, we've lost jobs. The nature of our relationships has changed. The way that our state is run has changed. Mr. Schlegel and I were talking before we came in here about how Zoom has taken over and things are just completely different. I think that based on the information that we had at the time, we went back and forth between, do masks work, do they not? Should we wear them? Should we take them away from first responders and hospital employees? It's been a learning curve, and I think that at the end of this, we came out with the sensibility of knowing that that masks work, N95s, KN95s. We came out of this with vaccines that have saved probably millions of lives. So I think after all was said and done, we came out of this a stronger country.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Schlegel.
I think one of the things it's done for me is just the reiteration of what we've all been through when we were growing up. And I think that is, if you're sick, stay home, stay away from everyone else. If you're really sick, go to the hospital, see a doctor. We've been given some training endlessly about how to wash our hands and where to cough. And those are simple, basic skills. But one of the things I think very strongly about is, we talk about masks. I think anything that people can do to make themselves feel safe and protected. But to say that masks work, there are child care providers that might say differently. And certainly I have seen firsthand in assisted living facilities some of the masks that come off of the faces of senior citizens. And I can remember in one instance somebody said something, what should I do with this? Because you don't need it outside necessarily of that nursing home. And I just said, Just drop it down. We'll take care of it. And it was filthy.
All right. Follow-up question for you. Was Governor Wolf correct to shut down schools when he did early on in the pandemic?
No, he was not. What I think we needed to do is take a commonsensical but tone down the rhetoric and the fear. I think that's first order number one. I used to say to our teachers, when we saw, for example, 9/11, a completely different issue, but I said, please understand my demeanor. When something's out of my control, I don't have a tendency to panic. I have a tendency to pull us all together and let's see how we can work together to solve the problem. Let's do it calmly. Let's do it together. Again, that whole notion that you do as much good to as many people as we can for as long as we can, and that all of us is better than one of us. So I certainly think we need to bring all those stakeholders together and kind of calmly work through the problem and come out the other end. Now all of a sudden, a year and a half later, we don't need to lock down. I don't think that we needed to do it then. I don't think that we certainly need to do it now. I think we need a commonsensical approach and coming together as a people. All right.
Ms. Miller, was Governor Wolf correct to shut down the schools?
The truth is, as I said, hindsight is always 20/20. We can talk about certainly the negative effects that missing school or switching to virtual school has had on our children, and for the educators too. It's been a really rough couple of years. I think Governor Wolf did what he thought he needed to do at the time with the information that he had. I think we could all sit here and pick apart every single decision that was made, but I don't think that's helpful. I think, as Mr. Schlegel said, moving forward, learning from our mistakes, learning from what worked, learning from what didn't, and God forbid this ever happens again, but now I think we'll be coming at it from a more sensible point of view.
Very good. Let's move on here. Pennsylvania has not executed a prison inmate since 1999, Gary Heidnick. Although capital punishment remains on the books and many prisoners exist on the very expensive death row in Pennsylvania and die of causes other than execution. What is your position on capital punishment, and should Pennsylvania rescind the death penalty? 60 seconds, Ms. Miller.
I am not in favor of the death penalty. I think it's burdensome on our tax system. I think it's burdensome on our judicial system. I think that it disproportionately affects people of color. And I know that there have been so many people who have been wrongly put to death. I think it's draconian and outdated, and I think Pennsylvania should not have the death penalty.
Very good. Mr. Schlegel, 60 seconds.
I believe in following the law as is on the books. If it's used, it should be rare. And it should be used only in the most heinous of crimes.
All right. Very good. I'm sorry, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just as a follow-up, I think I've talked to a lot of specifically Republicans that have that point of view, but then when we talk about things like abortion, they say they're pro-life. For me, if you're pro-life for anything, even if that person has committed a crime. So not only do I think there is a spiritual aspect of being a human taking responsibility for making the decision to end another human's life, but again, it's a burden on our entire system.
Any follow-up?
Well, again...
if not, I've got a follow-up if you want to.
Go right ahead.
Okay, very good. As a follow-up, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. I apologize there. Well, let me ask you this. The issue of Ms. Miller said about people wrongly put to death. I don't know if Pennsylvania's ever wrongly put anybody to death. They have certainly wrongly convicted people. I interviewed a gentleman in this studio who was on death row for 20 years before he was exonerated and found completely innocent from the crime for which he was convicted. Pennsylvania is one of the few states that does not offer any sort of compensatory amount for individuals that are exonerated after being wrongly convicted. Would you support having some sort of monetary compensation for somebody that has spent years in prison wrongly?
I think that's certainly worth taking a look at. we're human. We're going to make mistakes. We don't want to be making mistakes in any capacity, but certainly where it involves human life and taking away one's rights. So I think that there is merit at least looking at that and seeing what that would look like. But again, like so many other things in this day and age, it really does require letting all stakeholders weigh in and hashing it out together, and then moving forward with a solution that we think works for the people.
Ms. Miller, would you support some sort of compensatory measure for those who are exonerated after being wrongly incarcerated?
Absolutely, I do. If somebody's exonerated and they're released from prison, I think that we should be responsible for compensating them for not only life and life experiences that we've taken from them, but also their ability to earn a living. Also, even after people have been exonerated, it might be difficult for them just having that record of having been in jail, having people know about that. It might be difficult to find employment, and I think Pennsylvania needs to step up and also have reintegration back into society programs and benefits for those people.
Very good. Candidates, thank you very much for your congeniality and your thoughtful responses to the questions. And at this juncture, we're going to move to our closing statements. We're going to begin with Mr. Schlegel. You have up to 90 seconds. You may use any sort of notes if you have them. Thank
you, Laura. And thank you for serving as our moderator. As usual, you exuded the utmost in professionalism and did a great job, so I commend you for that. I also want to thank our audience for listening to us today. I asked the voters in the 101st to vote for me, John Schlegel, to be your next state representative. Again, my name will appear on the bottom right side of the ballot. I have served you before during both my professional career as a school administrator in the 101st, as well as my volunteer service in the community. It would be an honor to work for you in the State House, because public service has always been the focus of my career. I would consider it an honor to represent the 62,000 people who live in the 101st State House District. I vow to be a strong voice for you in Harrisburg, and I will work with other lawmakers to help make your lives better. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Schlegel. Good luck in these last few days of campaigning. And now with closing remarks, Catherine Miller.
Thank you for having us, and thank you, John, for coming. It's been fun. I have really enjoyed this campaign specifically. I have a team of about 20 people. We've raised about $40,000. We've got TV ads. We've got billboards, as I'm sure you saw on the way in today. It's been a blast. And I think my dedication to this campaign hopefully will show the constituents of the 101st how dedicated I am to this position. This is a passion of mine. It is a full-time job and something that I would take very seriously. And not only, as Mr. Schlegel said, do we represent 65,000 people in the 101, but also 13 million people in the state of Pennsylvania. And I would be honored to earn your vote for that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Miller. And again, best of luck to you in these final few days here. It's been a long slog, but you're coming down to the wire, candidates. And thank you, audience, for listening.